controlling your power bills. Why have you got such large power bills? Maybe it's because you have no control over your children. If you have no control over your children, the children are out of control. Therefore, your household budget may well be out of control. It seems to me there's a disposition within society that it seems to have to appease all its children, and it does not include them in the household economic and the budgeting of the house, which is it can be a grave error of judgment by parents to disclude children from understanding. Households need to understand their own economy, and including children, because children are a very expensive part of that. So having children face the facts of an overuse of electric products or individual TV screens for each child, etc., etc., constant recharging of iPads and stuff like that, in times of financial and economic stress, make no sense whatsoever for parents, and immaturity of parents has to be said. They cannot sit children around a table and say, this is our bills, these are what we need to spend to keep the household afloat. What can we do without? What can you sacrifice? You want the people and the children are into this climate change and into sacrificing things for the climate change, so you can enroll it into that, a politically correct idea, into enroll that into the household economics, because the less power they consume, surely there is less energy coming from the grid, and there's less strain on the grid, and therefore where there is coal-fired power stations used, it's a less use of the coal-fired power station. So it's no good people saying we want some action on climate change, which is apparently to do with CO2 and emissions, and yet we cannot say to children, you're directly involved in those emissions, and then enroll that, engage them in the idea of the economics of the household. Because when it comes to economic downturns where we're going now, we will seem to be going, it could be a very traumatic time for many individuals, for many families. Unless you can address the major circumstances facing families, which is the basic fundamentals of the life, like getting a roof over your head, putting food on the table, etc., must come first, must be first priority consideration before anything else. And it's idea that you cannot tell children what to do anymore, or how to be, or how to behave themselves in regards to the household as a whole, will, I believe, be one of the main causes of bringing many households undone. And it may be too late for that if parents haven't got the courage to ask children to behave according to the budget. Then the parents themselves are part of the cause of the problems that the children will have later on, if the economy starts to begin to fail for one reason or the other. The prevailing winds in the world aren't very good for long-term economic forecasting. So we've got to look at things holistically in regards to budgeting in households, especially when children are involved, because regardless, children may be thinking they're suffering now if they have to use less iPad or switch their televisions off or whatever. They'll be suffering a lot more when the electricity bill comes in and it overwhelms the ability to pay the power bill because the rents are so high, because the central banks are putting up interest rates and inflating the cost of accommodation. When they say they're tackling inflation, they actually call a direct cause of negative inflation. And therefore, the acts of what the central bankers are doing, raising interest rates right now, is not necessary. It may be good economic judgment on their part for whatever their agenda is, but it's no good economic judgment in regards to society, because society ought to be the vast majority, not just a very very minimum amount of people in central banks are dictating terms to the rest of the majority, the vast majority, which is not actually democratic. So there's a lack of discourse, there's a lot of intellectual intercourse between, or philosophy, a detached philosophy by the central bankers, as it is to the general population, especially in democracies. What is a democracy? It's run by the majority. If the majority are not considered in the financial meanderings of the central bankers, then you can no longer say it's actually a economic democracy. It may be to some extent where you decide your own future. You decide how you run your household economics. So therefore we get back once again to bringing wisdom of economics into children and making them face up to the facts. They need to be involved in the household budget. What can they cut out? What is not good for them? Sugary drinks, too much takeaways, too many things that are no good for their health. If you just cut those out, and then that reduces the cost of grocery bills, and they reduce some of the pressure on the household electricity bill by economising, by volunteering. Ask the children, look, this is what it's costing. What would you like to sacrifice towards reducing your effect on the economics of the household and on climate change? Enroll them in that. They're all enrolled into climate change, for whatever the cause of that will be, or the effects of that. Nonetheless, climate is changing. But whatever the end result of that, we are yet to see. But as it goes along with all the other things that's happening in the world at the same time, I'm afraid many people are going to suffer because they can't get the children to behave in ways that gives them the discipline to get through hard times.